Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. A very good morning to everybody. Welcome to the second lecture of our course, Literature for Emotional Intelligence. For this particular lecture, I would like to talk about one aspect of emotional literacy, which is the ability to manage our negative thoughts, or what psychologists call negativity biases. Okay. But before we begin, I want to kind of unpack one component of this course, which is literature. What is literature? All right. This is my loose definition, my working definition of literature. Literature is a creative work that captures the imagination of its reader or audience through the art of storytelling. So the creative work is told to us, the storytelling is told to us, and we, the reader or the audience who is viewing the story, we need to use our imagination in order to appreciate the work of art, in order to appreciate the creative work. So talking about using our imagination, I'm quoting Dr. Seuss, a children's storyteller, with lots and lots of books, children's books. In this particular book, All the Places You'll Go, this is a rhyme that captures the element of using your imagination in order to go from one place to another. And I quote, "You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own and you'll know what you know, and you are the one who'll decide where to go." So reading is very much like that, right? Taking you on this journey, and the journey that you go is very much internal, right? On that note, I want to kind of introduce to you one work of art, which is a cartoon produced by Charles M. Schwartz, an American cartoonist who lived from 1922 to 2000. He produced this cartoon called Peanuts, and they were published in the American newspaper every day, including Sundays, very much like our Datuk Lat and his Lat cartoons. And it's a story about a group of children, so you've got Charlie Brown, the central character, his sister Sally Brown, you have Lucy Van Pelt, Linus, her brother Linus Van Pelt, and you have Charlie's dog Snoopy, and Snoopy's friend Woodstock the bird. Then you've got the other characters as well. So there are quite a few other characters in the stories, in Peanuts. So I'm going to be using a few of the stories from the cartoon strip. So one of them is this particular cartoon strip, and the question that is being asked in this cartoon strip. So this is a conversation between Lucy, the older sister, and Linus, the younger brother. So Linus asks Lucy one day, how can a person just decide what he's going to think? Doesn't he have to think first and then try to discover what it is that he's thought? And then there's this blank, silent stare between them. And Linus says, "You're looking at me with blank eyes." Like, what can you say to something like that? Sometimes young kids say the darnest things, right? They say things that are so profound and you wonder where it's coming from. But this is an important aspect that Charles Schwartz is capturing in this cartoon. The question that we need to ask ourselves: can we decide what we are going to think, or does thinking happen and then we figure out how to suss it out, how to work through those thoughts? So on that note, ask yourself if you've ever had these thoughts: I can't do this, I'm never good enough, they're so much smarter than I am, I'm afraid of their judgment, this is the worst thing that could have happened, I failed, I feel like giving up, I feel all alone. So are these thoughts that you think up, or thoughts that come to you? Can you control them? Do you have any control over them? So that's the issue here. These thoughts are in fact what we call, or what psychologists call, negativity bias. Right? Negativity bias basically is a tendency to focus on, look for, dwell on negative aspect of life. Catherine Moore, the psychologist, says of negativity bias, and I quote, "Even when we experience numerous good events in our day, negativity bias can cause us to focus on the sole bad thing that occurred. It can lead us to ruminate on small things, worry over having made a bad impression, and linger on negative comments and the like." So it's a quite disturbing experience if you think about it, right? Negativity bias. So we want to kind of like allow our mind the opportunity to work for us without it causing us more disturbance. And some examples of negativity bias that you may have experienced yourself include, you receive a performance review from your supervisor, your lecturer. Overall, it's quite positive. You made some strong performance. You had some good achievements, and then your supervisor gave you some constructive criticism, some constructive comments, and points out areas in which you can improve. And what do? You find yourself fixating on those remarks. You ignore these positive comments, right? You ignore the positive comments. You focus more on the bits that you need to work on, and this leaves you feeling upset, feeling angry. Anyone's felt that before? I know I have, right? So this is one example of negativity bias. Another example is, you try to speak up in front of your classmates during class, and your ideas just don't flow very well. Maybe, you feel a bit anxious, maybe you feel a bit nervous, uncertain whether they will receive your ideas well or not. Whatever the reason is, you don't sound as confident when you're speaking in front of everybody. And this leaves you feeling really embarrassed. And every time you think about this, you're even more embarrassed. So this one event, one episode, continues to play in your mind again and again and again. So this is another example of negativity bias. So what are the effects of negativity bias? One of the effects is it can increase our level of fear, anxiety, and stress. According to medical research in 2019, it shows that negativity bias, is predicted by a level of stress. That means the higher your level of stress, the greater the tendency for you to be in the state of negative in your mind, to exhibit negativity bias. So we want to be able to reduce our negativity bias, and at the same time also reduce the stress, because they are interrelated. So what can you do about it, about this negativity bias? So have a look at this particular cartoon strip. This is Lucy again, Lucy Van Pelt, and this is Charlie Brown. Okay, so Lucy sometimes opens these psychiatric help booths, and she charges her friends 5 cents for her profound advice about life. Charlie comes to Lucy one day and says, "I have deep feelings of depressions. What can I do about it?" And she thinks, Lucy's thinking about it, and then she says, "Snap out of it. 5 cents, please." Okay, I know it's a little bit humorous and maybe even comical that this idea that depression can be snapped out of, right? For those of us who've experienced depression, you know it's not something you can snap out of. But what Charles Schwartz is doing in this particular cartoon strip is to kind of make fun or even humor those people who think that depression is something you can snap out of, because it's not that easy, is it? Right? And there's so much more that needs to go into it. But putting it in this cartoon strip makes us think about this issue, right? So, one of the things that negativity bias does, besides causing us more stress and making us think more negative thoughts, it can also make us develop a fixed mindset, where you feel like you are not able to move forward with your life, that you feel like whatever it is that's going on in your life, this is it. You are not able to change your circumstance. So in another study from the Stress, Trauma and Resilience program, they found that the issue of negativity bias can be overcome by the way we talk to ourselves about our experiences. How do we relate to ourselves in understanding that negative experience? How do you talk to yourself? Do you say those negative things again and again and again? Or are you more mindful, right? Do you use those negative experiences and encounters to challenge yourself? And are you mindful of what is important and what isn't? Okay, so these elements of wanting to challenge yourself, wanting to kind of learn from your experiences and being more mindful, these are also components of emotional intelligence, as we will explore the rest of the semester. Okay, so negativity bias has very direct links to both emotional intelligence as well as to growth mindset, because when you have negativity bias, you tend to have more of a fixed mindset. What we want to do is develop a growth mindset. So they are all interconnected. So what's one way to overcome this? One of the key things that we can do is this concept called reframing. So imagine you're taking a picture and you're putting it into a frame, a picture frame. And maybe the picture looks nice with the frame, but with the change of frame, the picture will look even nicer. So this idea of reframing the thought is done through the process of expressive writing, where you just express your emotions, your thoughts, your ideas in writing. Okay? So one way to overcome negativity bias is by reframing the experience and focusing on how the experience has changed you. Okay? And how do you do that? You ask yourself these questions as you are writing your thoughts down. You ask yourself not how am I feeling, not what are these thoughts that I'm feeling right now, not what are these negative experiences that I'm encountering, rather what would I do differently? So I've gone through this negative experience, or I've gone through this experience that has affected me emotionally, psychologically. What would I do differently? If I got a chance to redo it, what would I do differently? Okay, and another question that you can also ask is, what lessons have I learned from that experience? Okay, so by asking yourself these questions, you're not changing the negative experience, but you're using it as a way to learn for yourself so that you are better equipped for the next situation that comes up. In this particular website, this blog post called Mind Viruses and How to Overcome Them. Negativity biases such as statements like, I can't do this, I want to give up, I have failed, this is the worst thing that could have happened to me. they are known as mind viruses, which is true if you think about it, right? Because viruses are things that cripples the body, that makes you feel sick, that makes you not be able to function. You can't do your work well, you can't study well. You just your whole life just gets, stalled, right? So negativity bias, or these negative phrases that we keep saying to ourselves again and again and again, they are like mind viruses, and they can literally cripple our mind and make us not be able to be productive. So in this blog post, they recommend certain medicine, or phrases that can be used as medicines. So for instance, for the phrase, I can't do this, one of the things that they suggest that we use to reframe our mind, okay, is by saying things like, you may not be sure how to do this, but there are plenty of ways for you to learn, okay, and you can find help, for instance. And another phrase, I want to give up. You've been trying something and it just gets too hard and you just feel like giving up. The one way to reframe your mind is by saying, if you give up, you've lost and you're no loser. It may take you a little more time, but you are fully capable of seeing this through. Okay? And the third one, I failed. A good way to reframe that statement, I have failed, is to say that this situation doesn't define you. You haven't failed. You failed that one moment, but you as a person, you have not failed, right? It doesn't define you. It doesn't label you as a failure all your life. It's just that one moment, one situation. There are ways to improve, and there are times that you can come back and redo that, or even outdo yourself, okay? So these are important statements that we can think about when we are reframing our negativity biases. So why is it important to understand negativity bias and to even reframe negativity biases? This is something called, the skill is called self-regulation, the ability to think about your own thinking and to step outside your own head and determine if you are comprehending or thinking about something effectively. This is from a work by Peter Hollins in his book Think Like Einstein, 2019. So what does self-regulation require? It requires a certain amount of self-awareness and the ability to see that the status quo or your current approach isn't working. So whatever it is that you're doing, if it's not making you feel good about yourself, if it's making you feel awful, making you feel negative, making you feel doubt your own ability, making you feel upset about yourself, frustrated with yourself, obviously whatever it is that you're doing, it's not working, right? Because what you want is, when you do something, you feel good, you feel better, you feel like you're moving, you're progressing, right? So what self-regulation does is it allows you to exercise a level of self-awareness in order for you to evaluate whatever it is that I'm doing. If it's not making me feel better, then I need to change my approach, right? It must be something I can do that is much better, that can help me feel much better. So this is why this skill of self-regulation is important. And geniuses, like Einstein and others like him, are known to be able to exercise self-regulation. They don't wait for someone else to validate their worth. If they're doing something that they themselves don't feel good about, that doesn't make them feel happy, right? They will change them. They will change the behavior. They will change their thought process. So this is one component of emotional intelligence. So what is emotional intelligence then? So in this book by Peter Hollins, he talks about emotional intelligence, quoting a couple of scholars, a couple of psychologists. Emotional intelligence, and I quote, is the ability to monitor one's own and other people's feelings and emotions. to discriminate among them, and to use this information for what purpose? To guide one's thinking and actions. So you monitor it in order to guide your actions. So again, you're asking yourself, how is this helping me? Is this making me feel good about myself? Is this making me feel good about my circumstance, my situation? Can I work at it to improve my life? Can I work at these emotions and help me improve my life? So that's why emotional intelligence is valuable. All right, it's a form of a guide towards helping us with our thinking and our actions. And in fact, emotional intelligence is also related to another kind of intelligence. In 1983, Howard Gardner's book on the theory of multiple intelligence identifies multiple aspects of intelligences, right? You may be musically inclined, you may be linguistically inclined, you may be logically or even mathematically inclined. Your intelligence varies from one to another, right? And there is one key component that he also talks about, that Gardner talks about, which is called intrapersonal intelligence. And in fact, emotional intelligence requires the development of intrapersonal intelligence. So what is intrapersonal intelligence then? So intrapersonal intelligence is that you think, is when you think about your own actions and thoughts a lot, that you have a high level of self-awareness, that it comes with the ability to self-regulate actions and thoughts, that you have an accurate and mostly objective sense of self. What does that mean? This idea of being objective. Sometimes when something happens, when you do something and something happens, and it just doesn't go the way you want it to be, you tend to kind of be overly critical about yourself. You kind of beat yourself down, and you're very critical. Your evaluation of yourself may be too harsh. Then you're not being objective, right? You think you could do better, you should know better, so you're quite hard on yourself. But if you're objective with yourself, you will say things like, okay, that was a very challenging experience. I've had to evaluate my position. I need to improve myself in these other areas in order for me to get myself to the level I want to be. So that's one way of identifying emotional intelligence, by asking yourself questions that evaluate yourself in an objective manner.